Hello. Hello and good morning. It's very nice to see this crowd gathered. It was hard to know what to anticipate, so I am really grateful. I know many faces and I don't know all the faces. So I will introduce myself. I am Linda Hayes. I am the current director of the Council on Aging and Senior Center. I have been here for a little over 4 years in Scituate working. I had previously worked at the Duxbury Senior Center for 10 years as the assistant director and activities coordinator, so I come from good stock, but I am happy to be here and happy at the juncture we are currently at. It's been a long wait, as I know many of you will echo. So I do apologize, and will now apologize at the number of chairs that I guess I thought we would have plenty here in this building, and we do lack some. So I apologize. Hopefully the coffee makes up for it. And my second apology is to the tea drinkers. Forgot the water. So it does underscore a little bit of what we do at the Senior Center and for the Senior Center, and that is having to schlep quite often between buildings, whether we're having a luncheon at the Maritime Center without having a kitchen, or having it catered, or doing our own thing, or here for our classes, and for providing what we like to do. We're natural hostesses. We like to provide a nice setting for people. So hopefully we've come close, but I do apologize. So I also want to introduce a few other people besides myself. I do have a few board members here. I don't know if they might like to stand up for me. So the Council on Aging board members, I have Dr. Price, Gordon, Leslie James, Helen Jablonski, J.D. Miller, Lucille Sorrentino. So we have a board of 9 members that work with me. A few work, and so needless to say are not able to be here and may be with us tonight. Okay, and also I will introduce, or many of you know, most of you, hopefully all of you know, Karen Canfield is here as our selectman representative. There she is, to help answer questions that you may have that we may not have all of the answers to. So we are here to talk about and to provide more information, because I had noticed a little misinformation posted somewhere, and realized just pre-town meeting that we wanted everyone to really understand what was being asked and what we wanted for support at this point, which is very important. The support right now is very important. So there just couldn't be enough opportunities, I guess, for us to provide that information to you, make sure everybody had the same information and was going to understand walking into town meeting what they were going to be asked as residents, as taxpayers. So we are talking about an article on the town meeting warrant, Article 3, early in the evening, requesting funding to be allocated or appropriated out of the capital plan budget. So it's money that is there. It is called free cash. Hardly free, I'm sure, but free cash. Originally, the request had been for $500,000, and our new town administrator made a comprehensive, wonderful, thoughtful proposal for the senior center to the Board of Selectmen last month, and again at the senior center for many of our audience. And it promoted the idea that if we go higher in the request, then we could actually determine, because there was a lot of talk tossed around about the cost of the senior center, especially based on the estimates that were given through the feasibility study of the various sites. So to really be able to hone in and give a concrete number when the time comes for that vote became very important. So that was the impetus really for him to make that request and to make that proposal for the site that was finally selected by the Board of Selectmen, with input, information from the feasibility study that had been done, input from the Council on Aging, and they were really able to determine, based on information, certainly with their own discussions with residents, with citizens of Scituate, and the many different interests really that they always have to consider. So the Gates, old Gates school location is the chosen site. Initially that was uncertain as to where exactly that would go, and they were still going to determine that. So along with the town administrator now, in his proposal, it was determined really that the old gate school structure, still sitting there now vacant, having been somewhat refurbished a little bit for some recreation use with that gymnasium that everyone loves so much, that will remain in this proposal, is being used currently, and there are offices there for recreation, and they could certainly use other space. So besides that, the rest of the building is costing money, will continue to cost money, and has not been determined to have a use. So the proposal by the town administrator is to take that building down and to use that space, which is wonderful, substantial space for a senior center, and then be able to provide a new standalone building, which was the original proposal anyway, just now not having to infringe on any of the other uses of the space set behind or around the historical buildings, the soccer field, the baseball field, the tennis courts, which always were going to remain anyway. So there's a lot going on there, but not so much that we can't place a senior center, have substantial space for the attributes that we would like to include in a senior center, and then also be able to take advantage of some of the other opportunities there, with the rec department there, with the gymnasium there, with the tennis courts there, with the historical buildings there, with the soccer field, which I guess maybe would be adding a track if there isn't already one there. So that is the current proposal, that building will come, the substantial portion of that building will come down. There's the old C wing on the side, if you're facing the building on the right side, and then there is the substantial portion, the B wing, which most people look at and have some sentiment for, because it's a majestic building, it's a nice looking building from the outside. It's not conducive, and was determined by, there was a committee, of course, that looked into reuse of that building. There was a plan, a possible plan, that saw it as being adequate with refurbishing for perhaps town offices, but not for a senior center. There's 16 level changes in that building. Redoing that building would just take on gargantuan proportions, and the estimate for that is easily 30 million, if not more. Now, everybody knows, even though we're supportive here and much in need of a new senior center, that as taxpayers, that's a difficult request. So certainly it was felt, without a doubt, that there was no appetite in the community for that kind of a project, which was one of the biggest reasons, really, they looked again at what we could do. So, I am hoping that there are those here who may have questions, concerns, comments, want some of the points clarified, which we're happy to do here, I'm happy to do. I can talk about the senior center, whatever you might like, but maybe I'll open just at this minute to some questions if you have them about any of what I've just spoken about. We are being taped, and I just remembered as I looked over at Seth Pfeiffer from SCTV. So we are going to put this on air so that comments are heard, understood, and our answers that, as they're given, are understood by those viewing, who maybe can't come out, or maybe they'll see this and then they'll want to come out tonight. Anyway, yes, Jack.
When you had a meeting at the school auditorium, I'm sorry, it's not going to be a fluid question here. A lady mentioned that the state has requirements, I believe dependent on the percentage of seniors in the town, the population, that the senior center has to be a certain size. When I saw the Board of Select Persons, men on the TV, this was not mentioned, and I haven't had a chance to ask or follow through on it, but it obviously affects the cost if it has to be a certain size, and I was wondering if there was any more verification of that.
There's no regulation in terms of what size it needs to be, other than what would be, what's recommended based on the population. Certainly there are recommendations. I mean, recommendations are for very large. You know, we might be talking, if we were getting numbers from the state, 25,000 square feet. No one's building that. Actually, I will say Newburyport built that size. Now, they happen to be a city, but same population as Scituate, roughly the same population of seniors. They built a 25,000 square foot senior center, but they reserved 10,000 square feet for future use, so they're letting it initially. So they're using 15,000. We certainly have across the state and even in our own local area other square footages that vary, but that we can use for a good model. But there is no actual regulation as to what size it must be, more than what it should be.
Thank
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Linda, could you just clarify, you said that the state has recommendations.
Mhm.
Are you saying that the state recommended a 25,000 square foot building for Scituate?
No. I will say that the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, when he speaks about the future of senior centers and what would be required, sorry, I shouldn't use that word, what would be recommended based on certain populations, that's all. Then he would have said that. And actually, he's probably said that if we happen to have a program manager from the Executive Office who has come down and spoken to the board and other board members from other towns, and he has said that.
The recommended square foot per senior by the state, it's not a requirement, the state recommendations from Elder Affairs, I believe was 4.5 square feet per senior center. So as Linda said, that would make our senior center recommended at somewhere between 25 to 30,000 square feet.
So that's an ideal. Yes.
There's also some difference of definition of a senior. I believe that.
You say we don't card at the door. You can sneak in if you want.
No, but it's a very serious point. One of the things I brought up in the past is that when I turned 60, I didn't hear anything about the senior center, yet I understand that the senior center is available to people 60 and older.
Yes.
So when we say what the square footage is per senior, are we talking about seniors at the age of 60, or are we talking about seniors at the age of 65?
We're generally using the number of 60 and over because that is the accepted. I joke, we don't card at the door.
Yep.
Frankly, anyone can come in, 55, 60, 50. Volunteering is younger.
I want to keep it serious and I want to keep it
Sure.
to facts. So I appreciate hearing the square footage per person, but I think that when I'm looking at what the total size of a building is, I want to know what the population is that we're referring to. That's why I asked the question. I appreciate you don't card at the door.
Isn't our number, Linda, 16 over 5,000?
Yes.
Yeah, so about 5,000 Scituate, 16 over.
Thank you.
And growing. Well, getting older,
We certainly, we had done, the feasibility study was done on the properties in town. Needs assessment in 2014 looked at a segment of the population for seniors. We have figures from our voting records here, 60 plus, right now 5,323. That's 29% of the total population, which is projected, of course, to go up to 37% if the projections are accurate for 2020.
I just had one question on, I may be wrong, but I think I read that area towns that have already built their senior centers are too small, and they're trying to add on, but like Marshfield, I think it.
There are definite. Marshfield's is pending. They would like to add their second floor. They have 12,500 square foot now and want to move up. Duxbury has 12,000 square feet and has operated with 12,000 square feet since 2001. They are just approved to add 4,000 square feet to theirs, which bumps them up. Yes, sir.
So Linda, could you talk a little bit about a timeline?
Timeline, yes, I could. So, pending the approval of the appropriation of the money, the cash, at town meeting, there is already an OPM hired. They are called Vertex. That is the company that was chosen through the Public Building Commission. They have already published the request for services to go out to an architectural community. They've already had 30 respondents as of last week. There may be more now. And those submissions, those proposals are due April 11th, next week. So a week from then, more or less, they would be, or a certain number would be reviewed, called in for interviews, so selected somewhere towards the end of the month, but that is obviously dependent on the approval of the money to hire them. Following that, I guess that's at the end of it, they really end up with a year until next town meeting to do what they need to do, and that's the schematic design of a senior center. So it's not yet determined. We've been using a model that was designed by an architect who was hired by the architects that worked on the Gates reuse potential. So Durkee Brown brought somebody else in who was a prolific senior center architect, designer, and he modeled a building for us, and that was the 15,000 square foot building that many had heard about or maybe seen in the presentation that they made to the selectmen in June of 2016. So we have that, and it's a good one, but it's not carved in stone, so our architects that are now hired, when the time comes, April, May, would look at the new site, look at the possibilities, look at the needs, look at the programming that we've talked about, and then make a design with our help. Is that good? And then next town meeting would be the request for the actual amount of money that the senior center will be determined to cost. Yes, ma'am.
Has any consideration being given to utilizing plans for a town that's already built a senior center and had worked out the kinks and, you know, would make the build a lot smoother, I would assume?
It's sort of my understanding that the architects don't really work that way.
Well, of course they don't.
You know, it isn't to say that we wouldn't. It isn't to say that we wouldn't like certain attributes of other centers that, as we look at them, and that certainly is part of the process, no doubt. Does that help to mitigate any of the costs? I'm not sure. That would be a conversation to have once we get into more discussions, but they've not been available to purchase the plans for other senior centers. Yes.
I have a couple questions. I'm a little confused about the money that we're going to be talking about on Monday. How much exactly is that amount, and what is that amount for?
983,000 and some change.
$650.
Thank you.
980.
Do you want me to do that?
And,
Sure.
and what
We'll
is
give
it?
you another voice.
Hi, I'm Karen Canfield. Is this working?
Yep.
So, yeah, so Article 3 within, it's $9.4 million request for 47 items. And in that is $983 and $983,650 for the design, engineering, and bid documents for the senior center. And what that means is soup to nuts, look at the site, look at that, what it's going to cost to remove the building that's there, anything that needs to be done to make that site viable, and then to design the building with the help of the Public Building Commission, which I did want to note that that committee, which is charged in the town for overseeing construction, also has two user members. One is Linda and JD? And yes. JD, who's the head, chair of the Council of Aging. So their voices will be heard at every step of this process in the design, which I think is really important to getting the product we want. When it's all done, that money will give us complete documents, and to your point, hopefully we can save some money in the design, but that they will go out to bid. And when we come back in next November to ask for money, it will be for, we'll know exactly what the building looks like, we'll know exactly what it's going to cost because it will have been bid, and it will be up to the voters to see if those things will be supported. So it'll be a completely vetted process, so that's what it buys, yes.
Okay, I'm kind of overwhelmed by these figures.
Yeah.
How much time does somebody have? How much time is allocated? Is it 3 months this has to be done in? Is it 6 months it has to be done in? What's the time frame?
For the design and engineering?
Yes.
1 year.
Okay, so if you're talking almost $1 million, I just did this roughly, I did it on $500,000. You're talking on $500,000, 360 days, you're talking about paying, I don't know whom, $1,388 per day.
It's a ton of money, yeah.
How can that be?
So the way, yes, and the board asked those questions too. It's, so there's a couple of answers to that. So the one question is, what's it cost for design and engineering generally for construction? And Gordon, you had those numbers. Basically, it was
10%.
10% of the overall cost. depending on how big it was. That's what it costs. But why it costs so much is because you are paying not only for the architect, which, you know, God bless them for all their work. You're paying for the engineers, you're paying for the site engineers, you're paying for traffic engineers, you're paying for, you know, all of the experts that have to look at how do you put the building together in that site. And it's a long process, it's a public process, and it just costs that much. And when we came before you for the library, I was involved in that before my current role. It was the percent. That's what it costs for engineering design, and I know it's a huge number, but
Okay, I have a second.
you're relying on experts to make sure that the building's going to work.
And I don't know if this is legally feasible, but my other question would be, is there any way of reducing, we have 5 major universities in Cambridge, Boston, we have MIT, we have Harvard, we have the UBC, and Northeastern. And I don't know which of those colleges have architect programs. Is there any way to reduce costs by using one of the universities? Because they're supervised by licensed architects. And it would seem to me that that would bring down the cost considerably if you did that.
That's a really good question. I don't know for certain the answer. My guess, and this is my guess, and I'll verify this, is we have very strict rules we have to follow for public, using public funds, as far as bidding out. JD's nodding his head. The public bidding process. Is anybody on the Public Building Commission that can verify that? I think it has more to do with how we have to govern our spending and our processes, but I'll ask that question. I mean, anything we can do to keep the cost down, obviously we're committed to, but yeah.
Linda did mention that maybe you can talk about Senator O'Connor's piece.
There is even already the possibility, the very good possibility, that $2 million would be allocated to us in Scituate by Patrick O'Connor's, well, he made the recommendation and got Scituate onto the capital plan for the governor, which would come up in July. It's a little bit competitive, but he felt very good about our chances of being there. We have some support, certainly in the House and the Senate, for our being placed on this list that would provide this money to us. So we do have a little work to do, but he feels good about it. He's supportive, so that's someone from the state that is on our side helping to try to mitigate some of those costs. Yes, Elaine?
Yeah, I have a major concern. First of all, thank you for moving this forward as it, you seem to have mobilized the town, and I'm excited about that.
It's a good.
But I have a concern about the site in terms of traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Will the study include a reconfiguration of the traffic so that you're not taking your life in your hands every time you come and go from the building?
Yes, I mean, the short answer, yes, absolutely. And frankly, I don't think I'm going out on a limb saying, you know, that's a little bit of value added from the site, is that it's always been a little bit of a problem, maybe an understatement, and so it would be looked at and hopefully improved, both for the senior center and in general for that area for the town.
And those costs are included in the plan? Yes. In the plan-in?
Thus far, yes, for this design phase, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any estimate on how much it's going to cost to bring that building down?
To bring the building down. The estimate is maybe $1 million has been used, could be more. There's certainly the uncertainty of what they'll find, so there needs to be someone that actually goes in and determines what it's going to take. But somewhere, I guess, we can conservatively say 1 to 2 million. Yes, Ron.
They haven't determined yet whether the new building would be attached to where that section came off, or whether it would be a separate building.
Well, the recommendation is certainly for a standalone building, whether there will be a connection to what remains for what is being used by the rec department. That sort of remains to be seen as part of the design process, whether it's a valuable or useful
Well,
part.
it seems to cut down with somewhat on the price of filling in that side after they take it off, if it was.
and I'm not sure, if I'm sure which piece you mean, but the C wing, the older one on the right side, that's gone. The other piece, there could be something between the A, what remains of A, and B, the larger portion.
Because you have to seal up that whole section.
I got it.
If you build the
Mhm.
building
I
next
see.
to onto it, you wouldn't
I
have
see
to
what you're,
fill in as much.
Right, well, that's exactly what those fees are
Yeah.
supposed to
Mhm.
address, is to look at all of that, so we know going in, okay, we're gonna need to bring in Phil, we're gonna, you know, all those questions get answered before we say, okay, let's go. And that's one of the reasons it costs so much.
thank you, good point.
Yes, sir.
Going back to timeline, outside of the demolition of the building, can you estimate what groundbreaking would be in the future?
Oh, I'm a really optimistic person, so, you know, our first hope, I mean, for those, you know, on board with us, I mean, our first hope had been we'd end up at special town meeting with this information, and then maybe it would be June of 2020 or something like that, but if we don't go to town meeting until 2019, then there needs to be a ballot vote in May of 2019, so groundbreaking best case is that summer.
Yeah, well, can I just interject one thing?
Absolutely.
One of the reasons that the town administrator recommended and we approved the increase of the capital item that we're going to be asking people to vote in on Monday is that once that process is completed and next fall you come in and say, here's the package, here's what it costs, we're ready. It's shovel ready. We can, you know, God willing, as soon as the fall comes, you can start the work. Actually, you could start right away. So it will be a thorough process that will let us be ready to walk out that door with a shovel. So that's why he wanted to do it in this way, and we agreed with him. So,
Linda, question. You know, the process is going to, with this site, will slow things down a bit, because you just can't go in with a wrecking ball and knock a building down. We know that there's asbestos in the building, there may be other environmental issues. So, I mean, look at the police station. We voted to demolish that almost a year ago. And they're still working on it, still not taken down. So we know that this is going to slow the process down a little bit, but as Linda and Karen said, you know, we'd like to move the process along as fast as we can, because the longer we wait, the more it costs. Any construction project every year will add about 3 to 4%. So if you take a $10 million building, every year it's going to cost us another $350,000, $400,000 the longer it takes. So, you know, the idea is going to be to move it along as quick as we can, but the demolition definitely is going to slow things down some. It just can't be knocked down today or tomorrow.
Woman in the blue?
Thank you. At Brook Street, you talked about another piece of this project. Has that been taken off the docket, or is that still on with this project? And if it is, we need to hear about that and the cost of all of these things.
I'm not sure the other piece. Can you elaborate?
Upgrading the gym and all of that part of the project.
Mr. Boudreau, Jim talked about
Yes.
that. Well, yeah.
I mean,
that
because
sort of
it's all
means-
part of the project, right?
yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Then I think that we need to hear about that.
I think that's part of the next phase, being the design piece. I'm not sure it's included in the $983,650.
No, I think it will be.
It will be.
Yeah, Phyllis, thank you for that, because that is a very big point to why we think that putting this proposal out is we are going to have to address a lot of concerns for that building. If we don't do this, we'll have an empty building that's going to cost the town a lot of money just to sit there. By doing the construction and changing it, you will trigger accessibility issues and things with the existing gym, which should be addressed anyway. We will, and the Public Building Commission will have to define the scope once the approval is, hopefully if the approval is on Monday, and that can be included in that, which is also a cost saving to the town, because we can do it all and wrap it all together rather than do it separately. Our feeling is it was much more fiscally responsible to address all of this together as a macro for the town. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but and can we talk about some numbers on all these pieces?
We won't know until until we go out and start doing, so the $983,650 is to figure that out exactly. We can't know until we start doing the design work. I mean, we can guess, but we won't know.
So it's not like the feasibility studies we're talking about of $10 million just senior center.
Correct.
Thank you.
Some of that, to my understanding, is ADA compliancy, and again, there may be money available to the Recreation Department for that piece from the Commission on Disabilities and whatnot, so there is
Well, I just
yet
think,
to be determined.
right, and thank you for that, but I just think that, you know, for clarification,
Mhm.
that it's not
Mhm.
really just a $10 million senior center that we're talking about here,
Well,
probably.
granted, yep.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, behind.
If you're talking about recreation and senior all being in that one area, what about the parking? I mean,
Well,
that's a whole different.
well, the parking will certainly be addressed, and plenty of parking will be available given the space that's provided through demolition of the building that's there now, and what would go in its place. So there is opportunity for parking that I think we feel everyone feels the property offers. Plenty
Is
of
that
parking.
property across the street where they play on the fields and that, is that part of all this too?
No,
It's not?
no. That remains as is.
If you can envision the Gate School, excluding the gym, there's about, I think, 80,000 square feet. We're only gonna be using, I think probably the building's gonna be 15,000 square feet possibly. So there's gonna be a lot of area left for parking and outdoor activities.
I mean,
So I understand your concern, but
6 acres, I believe, included the gates when the initial feasibility study.
yeah.
Also included the soccer field area. Yes.
I'm not as familiar with gates as I should be, but I drove up the other day, there's a building on the right that says A building. So what is the actual facade that's being saved? The middle and then the gymnasium is what, the C building?
No, if you're facing gates, the C wing is the old 1950s flat, sort of vertical piece, perpendicular to First Parish. The big area with the facade and the cupola is the B. That's proposed to come down. Adjacent to that on the other side and jutting backwards toward the tennis courts is the A and the gymnasium. So, again, it's yet to be determined how much of A could or should remain for use by the Recreation Department, but that is part of the design phase.
And where's the rec department now in the building?
They are down below the gymnasium, back in the A. A portion of the A, but not all of it. You're welcome. Sorry, Tom in the back.
Yeah, I'm a little confused when I was watching the town administrator's presentation, and I'm hearing people here talk about $10 million, and the $10 million site was the Driftway. This was a $14 million site, and I don't know how the $4 million just disappeared off the table.
Yeah.
It was in the town administrator never mentioned it or anything else. All I can see is an increased cost by taking the buildings down, so it's gonna be much greater than 14 million in the overall.
Well, again, those are all estimates. Those were all estimates in the beginning. Certainly, the demolition of the building at the 1 or 2 million is going to be added to that. The C wing was part of the initial feasibility study at that site. So that was $1 million, I believe, he included in that 11 million or 12 or 13 cost for this site. But there was also $1 million booked for the relocation of the soccer field. So just saying, there were some items in there that may or may not be happening now. This is additional. So it's only an estimate based on construction costs and an idea for the square footage and the placement that has it at 10 million. And we would hope to keep it as close to that as possible, just because that seems to be a current consideration cost-wise for this.
Why do we pay for the studies to begin with when they come up with 14 million and 10 million?
Well, they are providing information for the subsequent phase.
But it sounds like you're taking the information and throwing it out the door.
No, we're not.
Where did the 4 million go? I mean, you
The
said-
4 million, I'm not sure what specifically,
Well, they said that site was estimated at just under 14 million, the
Oh,
Driftway was
14.
just under 10 million. That's $4 million more.
mhm.
So how, where did the 4 million, everybody's talking about 10 million now for this site. When you've taken the soccer field out for $1 million, but you've added $1 million on the other end, so you're still at 14 million. So I don't know where it goes and why do we do studies if nobody's gonna pay attention to it?
The site work alone differed by $2 million between the Gates property and Driftway. Just the site work.
Yeah.
So that's 2 million of it right there, and another million and a half for the soccer field relocation.
Mhm.
So now you're at 3.5.
But you're still adding back onto it, like the demolition and adding all this other
Yeah.
stuff.
So we may be talking about 10 million just for the, the actual construction of a building, and yes, it could be more once we add the other peripheral projects. Mhm.
Can I
It
add?
just
Yes.
doesn't make sense.
And Karen will add.
I can't help myself. So if you looked at that study, it was consistent on all the 4 sites that were looked at, that it was, I believe it was 9.6 for the building. That's what it's gonna cost to build whatever building, 15,000 square foot to meet the needs. That was the number that that was very useful information. So regardless of the site, you're starting with 9.6. Then you look at all of the different sites for, if we did this, what would that cost? That informed us to make the choices we had to make. Purple Dinosaur was taken up for obvious reasons. You couldn't expand. It was in the residential. So those studies were extremely useful in drilling down on what we needed to, how we could accomplish building a senior center that met the needs that were defined. So by putting it so originally there wasn't anticipated that building could go away. That wasn't in the design at that point, which in hindsight would have been kind of a nice thing to put in there, but at the time it wasn't put in the scope. So the Gates site had anticipating sort of putting the building around the existing building. As we drilled down on it further and we said, well, as a town, we have to address the former Gates building. It isn't, you're right, it is not a standalone decision. But this town is not a standalone decision. It's all of our money, all of this goes out of the same pocket. So if we can save money in the process by removing the building, which we have to address anyway, put the center in a place that's, I think, makes it a centerpiece for the community, and use that site in a viable way. It may cost more than the Driftway site, yes, but in the end, the product is so much better for the town and will save money that we would have to spend on it anyway. That's my feeling on it, and I hope that kind of addresses, where did it all go kind of thing. We didn't anticipate taking down Gates at the outset, but I think that Mr. Boudreau's analysis and our input, based on all of the work that the council has done for years, I think this solution checks a lot of boxes and is a responsible way to go forward. So I hope that answers a little more. Hello, Bill.
Yes, yeah.
Do we have any photos or videos of the building so that people will all be on the same page and know what we're talking about?
I don't, although I do have a photo of the facade. I didn't really plan with that for a handout. We could provide that at town meeting, certainly. I do have a diagram from the feasibility study of the site, so to speak, but it's changed, of course, with the elimination of the building. So if you did want to look at that, if anybody did want to look at that, and then we can be a little bit more clear about what's changed or what's happening with that. Initially, the site selected, put us in 2 places. This one had the building going towards the back of the soccer field for us, so quite independent, and moving the soccer field to make room around the senior center and provided parking there as well. So now we've moved up to the front where the building is now. and the soccer field doesn't move, and the parking will either be front, side, and some in back. But I can try to provide that for town meeting, picture-wise. Yes, oh, let me go to Lou, sorry. Just because he's been,
Can you pull up the sketch I emailed you?
I cannot pull up the sketch you emailed me, there's no wireless here, so I did not put that into the plan. Yes, Ron?
The thing that is important is to save most of that building because it is a very nice building. But that also causes problems when it comes to demolition, because the demolition has to be a very intricate thing as not to damage the other buildings. So that is, if we were taking the whole building down, they'd go in and blow it up and down it would come in a day. You know, but because we're trying to save the building, it becomes more intricate. But I'm for it.
Oh, thank you.
I want to
Thank
save
you.
the building as much as possible.
I see, yeah. Well, good. Okay.
I have another question about financing, putting aside the feasibility or whatever the study is gonna be. How is the ultimate senior center going to be financed? Are you going to be asking taxpayers for an override? And I don't know what other people pay in taxes here, but with President Trump's change now on the real estate taxes, nothing above 10,000, quite a few of us, myself included, are going to be affected by that. So where is the money going to come from?
I think certainly that has yet to be determined altogether. I think it's assumed there will need to be some sort of an override, but how much that requires is still to be determined, and we're going to try to mitigate that as much as possible once we can embark on the design of the center and what else we need and where else we can get funds from because of the nature of the project and the product. So we are looking for that. And whether the town has other means to provide reduction in that override cost and the cost in general remains to be seen too. So I think that's going to be a big conversation.
Have you looked into other ways to find financing? State, federal, whatever?
Well, certainly not. I mean, we've met with the state. Certainly says just continue to go to the legislature, continue to make your needs known, and there could be something there available to us federally too, potentially, and then locally in fundraising. The library did it. We're hoping to be able to maybe follow suit. I know that's still going into the purses of the residents here, but we're going to do what we can to make the cost as low as possible. So you can say, yeah, check.
So on Monday, at the town meeting, we're talking a majority vote. How are you, the Board of Select Persons, be presenting this to the voters? Just talking here today, we're talking almost a million. It's going to be directly voted on. The building itself may be 9.5 or 10 million. Taking down the gates may be 1 million. But I noticed that Mr. Harris felt strongly about the facade of the building, so I don't know if that's a factor in the architect's cost, trying to have a nice facade when it's built. But with that question is, will there be much stress on, because I think it would get the people more votes, is a combination senior center, but we're also helping the recreation department. And so I'm just wondering how this will be presented Monday. That's all.
I don't know who is presenting it for the Board of Selectmen, so Karen.
It's part, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is part of Article 3, which is the capital planning, capital funding request. And typically with the way it will go down, so John Daney is presenting on behalf of the board for this. Typically, you read all of the requests out, and as we all know, people will say hold if there's something you want to discuss. Certainly this one will get a hold, I would fully expect it to. And then we'll take each one in individual measure. My understanding, and Mr. Daney is also the liaison to the Council on Aging, so he's been involved from the beginning with the process. So I would suspect that he will get up and make the pitch that I just made, and there will be a discussion on the floor just like today. You had a couple other points about, facade. That will be part of the design process and figuring out, do you want to try to, is it cost effective to try to save it, or do we want to direct the architect to replicate? I mean, that could be a way. That will all be during the design phase, and it shouldn't be a part of the conversation on Monday per se, because we can't promise anything until that process goes through, goes through the process.
The Recreation Department, is that going to be mentioned?
That's a really good question. I haven't discussed it with Mr. Dan, how he tends to present, but I think it's a fair question that should be addressed, sort of the value added to this concept. Mr. Chapman.
What happens if the vote is no?
That is an excellent question. Then I'll be going down to Brook Street with a lot of coffee. If the answer's no, then we don't have the funding and we can't go forward with design and engineering of this site. And we will basically, sorry? Yeah, so we'll have to start over. And as Dr. Price pointed out, that A, would be a disappointment after all of the effort that's been put into this, and B, will end up costing money down the road should we, down the road of successful building the building. But yeah, I think the process we'll have to take a deep breath and fight again the next day.
What's the date and time of that meeting?
Of the town meeting?
Yes.
7 p.m.
7 o'clock. The Performing Arts Center at the high school, which is beautiful.
Parking is the same. The entrance to that facility is on the right side, to the right, but the parking is still in the back.
Yeah, like where it usually is, but to the right.
Oh, wow. For Canada? Yeah. I mean, okay, sir.
It's probably directed more to Ms. Canfield.
Okay.
I'll stand back up.
I know you don't know the exact language of what's going to be brought on Monday. Mr. Danny is the one who's presenting. But the vote for $983,000, is that the directive to the experts that are going to work on the study? Is the directive only for a senior center, or are there other things being considered in that study? And I don't mean, oh, by the way, I mean, when you put something out for bid, you're very specific about what you want done.
Yes.
So is this restricted only to the senior center, or are we asking these experts to consider something else going into that location besides the senior center? That's one.
Okay.
The follow-up question, which has been alluded to as far as an override, if this study comes back and says you're going to put the senior center there, you're going to put changes to the rec area, you're going to put a town, and just use an example, I'm not saying the town hall is going there, but potentially they say that would be an ideal place to put a town hall. Would you anticipate a year later when you come for funding that the funding is going to be more than for a senior center? Thus, an override would be much greater than just the funding to build a senior center. That's a long question, but I think that's on a lot of people's minds. Thank you.
No, those are good questions, and I'm sure that they'll come up on Monday. So the scope of the design will have to include how do we deal with the remaining structures on the site. It has to include that. So that $983,650 will include, okay, if you tear it down, how does that affect the gym? How does it affect the A-wing? That has to be all part of the package, and it will be included. As far as additional uses to the site, that won't be part of the scope. The original master plan that contemplated reusing that building for a town hall and senior center combined, which was the $25 to $30 million estimate that we talked about at the beginning. That building's no longer in play. It's gonna, if we go forward with this, that building goes away. So We won't be contemplating doing anything other than tearing down the building, putting the senior center, and making the accommodations that we need to make the site work. I hope that answers. Does that answer all the questions?
I just asked that we be as transparent as possible to Monday night,
Absolutely.
let people understand what this study is definitely directed towards.
Right, the purpose of it is to make that site feasible for a standalone senior center. And the ancillary is it will affect the ones that we don't take down, and we will have to address that because that wouldn't be transparent, and it's also not realistic. Mrs. Price?
One tiny little comment. I'm listening to a few people here today, and it's wonderful that we have great participation. Yesterday and the day before, while being at the transfer station and talking to a lot of people one-on-one, I heard a couple of comments that why are we paying, or why are we asking for more money for another study, quote unquote. And I think that's something that should be strongly clarified when presenting to the townspeople, because it's not a study.
I
A
agree.
lot of
Everybody
people are
tell your
confused.
neighbors, okay? Because this group will be able to get the word out, and I will definitely mention that. This is, end of the day, plans in hand, know exactly what it's gonna cost, and what we're, gonna be asking for however we end up paying for it, but, yeah. Phyllis?
Maybe I can help the answer for this guy that he's looking for. We're looking for numbers. We're just looking for numbers. I mean, and when the town administrator was down at Brook Street, to roll these two projects in together, because that's really what it is. You're using the senior center to get the rec part done. And it's gonna be a $20 million project. I mean,
That's not accurate, Phyllis.
well, I think that it's probably gonna be fairly close to that.
No,
I mean, given the
no, I
numbers
have to
that he
disagree
was
with you on
saying.
that. In fact, I'd actually disagree strongly with that because it's completely contrary to that. The idea is we want to do a senior center. At the same time, we have an empty building that is just it could be dangerous over time, as we all know, and right now it costs about $65,000 a year just sitting there because you got to heat it, you got to insure it, you got to do stuff, and for nothing, we get nothing for that. So we're going to have to address that. Rec department's already in there. The gym is phenomenal. It was just renovated. It's beautiful, but we don't have appropriate accessibility to it. Now you have to go in the building and take the elevator and go up and around. So those are things the town needs to address. It's not a let's make a recreation complex at the same time. It's really put a senior center in and fix the accessibility and the use of the A-wing so that we have something that is viable for the town at an incremental cost as opposed to, and I don't know where you think it's going to cost $20 million to do that incremental, but I don't have the numbers yet, but I won't be happy.
Well, those are the numbers that the town administrator
Yeah, that's
threw
something
out.
we're going to have to do anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, I mean, let's be honest. I think that's what the people are looking at here.
Right.
It's not
that's why we're having
just a
this
senior,
meeting, is trying to get the
but it's
truth out.
not just a senior center. It's rolling the rec into it too. Well, the accessibility of the recreation center.
I'm a writer, so words really matter to me, and we're not rolling anything into it. We're building a senior center, and it will affect the other spaces that will remain as an asset to both the town and to the seniors.
In the survey that was put out, and even after I hear it quite often, a lot of people want to see more of a multi-generational or some activities that the senior center would involve with other younger people. And I know that Linda and her staff do some of that now. And I think this offers the opportunity with rec being there to do more of that. So it is going to answer, I think, to some degree, those people out there who want to see more of a coordinated group, working together. So, is it going to be more? Yeah, it's going to be more. But it's also, as Linda said, we're checking off a few more boxes that are going to be left unchecked if this doesn't happen. So, I think I don't think it's going to cost 20 minutes. It's going to cost more than 10, but I think it's going to be worth it. To answer the gentleman who asked about funding, you know, I'm not a FOSS board member, but I know there are people here from FOSS, which is the Friends of Scituate Seniors, who are the fundraising effort, you know, for this whole process. And I'm sure they'd be happy to sign any of you up if you're not members already. You know, FOSS already in their you know ways of like $75,000, $80,000, I think. And I can tell you firsthand that I know that there are several people, generous people in this town, who are waiting to see this project actually know that it's going to happen. And there are people in this town who will step up to the plate and make significant donations to help this process get over the top. So, and maybe some people in this room would be happy to do that also. So, you know, is it going to cost us all some money? Sure. But, you know, I think it's money well spent. And when you look at what the town spends per senior per year, was $4.44, I think, per senior per year, and we're spending $13,000 per pupil per year. Now, I'm not saying that that is money well spent. It is money that is very well spent. But we also need to look at what the needs are of the senior population in Scituate. And I don't think the additional cost is going to be so significant that it's going to cause people to move out of town like some people are saying. It can be done, and every effort will be done with Linda and JD on the building commission and with input from the Council on Aging and all of you people to make sure that we end up with a center that's fiscally responsible. We're not going to build a Taj Mahal. I know that was mentioned at some point in the past. We're not building a Taj Mahal. We're going to build something that is workable and that is fiscally responsible. And every effort by the board and by the town administrator and by Linda and everyone is going to be geared toward that. So I don't think we have to worry so much about the end result and what it's going to cost us. You know, I know the people, when doing the library funding, I was involved in that. And when I was asked to join the library group to help to find funding, my answer was to Les Ball, who's my best friend. I said, who goes to the library anymore? I said, people go to the internet. Well, when I drove by the library this morning, my way here, the parking lot was about full. And I go by that library usually twice a day, and I know it is mostly full most of the time. And that's what will happen with the center. Linda knows that. We all know it. I visited the Wellesley Center 2 months ago. It had been open 3 weeks. It's a center about 13,000 square feet. I know people say, oh, Wellesley. That's my phone. Sorry. I'll be home in about 10 minutes. The Wellesley Center was in a very small, dilapidated structure like we have here. They had about the same number of participants that Linda and her staff have active, maybe 300, 400 people. I asked the director, and they have. Do you want me to walk your car? They have a swipe system like we do here, and I asked the director. I said, you've been open about 2 weeks. What's your activity level been like? She said, we gave out 1,600 swipe cards in the first 2 weeks that they were open. So, you know, I'm a true believer in that you build it and they'll come.
Thank you. You know, I actually was going, just one more comment to that. And, you know, the Recreation Department has been moved there. They needed space. It's actually a value to the town that they were able to move in there and retain the gym and utilize that resource. So any improvements there were going to happen anyway. I also want to just mention when the Board of Selectmen was presented with the proposal that maybe Gates would be renovated for a town hall and a senior center would be included then as a standalone building. You know, they really felt that the town couldn't really take that on and they really wanted a senior center. So they unbundled that. They said, you know, that's not for now. We can't do that. We won't do that to the senior center. And they really left us here doing what we're doing now. So that really still remains the priority and the point of this. So the programming aspect and the benefit and opportunity of having the rec department there and having the senior center on the same campus as well as some other attributes is just good value. I'm sorry, there was just one woman here.
I think you know, it's very embarrassing in town that we have the senior center that we have. And I'm wondering if there's any way they can send out a public announcement and telling people. I mean, I think even the young people, they don't want to see our seniors treated the way they, you know, being housed the way they are in the facilities they have. And I think if we could get out some sort of a message how important this meeting is, that we support the senior center.
That is very nice, and we have had, you know, nicely enough, so the Friends of Scituate Seniors has, as Gordon had mentioned, had some volunteers themselves, legions of people at the transfer station the past couple of days, and even I was amazed, over 300 people at the transfer station Monday and Tuesday, but they were giving out a fact sheet, population statistics, use of the senior center currently, the proposal, you know, in a little soundbite of the $983,000. And people were receptive, you know, I think most people, they felt were receptive, many younger households. We would like to make some phone calls and get a broadcast out, I think, if we could do that through the town.
I think that would be great, because I think a lot of seniors don't go to the dump, you know, the transfer.
True, true. I mean, we feel like we have most, you know, those that we have in our database, we have made calls to, but, you know, in addition, for instance, a Marshfield statistic, they have actively over 100 Scituate residents active at their senior center, and 400 some odd in their database who are Scituate residents and who do utilize that senior center because, well, now it's become a home to them because it's not that far away and they're getting what they need out of it. We have well over 1,100 seniors using our senior center or taking part in our programs or services, but out of 5,000 seniors, obviously, we would love to have more coming in the door or taking part. Yes, Ron?
I think that the school is an ideal place for the senior center. And we're about 20 years overdue to have a decent senior center. I've seen it come up and got shot down for years. And everything else, dog walks and everything else got pushed in and then done. And we're still sitting here waiting for a senior center. Historically speaking, the center of the town is the Gates property. The town hall was there for years. It is the center of the town. People think of the harbor as being the center. The harbor is the business district, period. The center of the town is there at the Gates School property, and it's right that it should be there, and actually the town hall eventually should be there too, because that's where it started.
Thank you, Ron. Yes, I suppose, yeah. If there is anything else, if there's anything else people would like, John?
I just want to bring to everybody's attention when we're talking about the money. A number of years ago, as it's just brought up, the town meeting voted, what, $2 million or $2.5 million to build the senior center, and that fell through, but the money continued to be encumbered, or whatever the word is. That money was there until a couple of years ago, and we were asked to give that money back to the town, or unencumbered, or whatever the word is, so that our credit rating would be better to build the middle school and other things that were being money. So technically, the town had $2.5 million in the coffers dedicated to a senior center. So, you know, that money the town got back, let's say, you know, was, so they can give it back.